The tattoo artist's needle had been steady that night in Kandahar, despite the distant rumble of mortars. Captain Zara Ghost, Blackwood had chosen the design carefully, a constellation of Arabic numerals and coordinates wrapped around a stylized compass rose, etched in midnight blue ink across her left shoulder blade. To most observers, it looked like decorative aviation art. To Major Dylan Corrigan, standing in the pre-flight briefing room 3 years later, it was nothing more than useless ink on a washed-up pilot. The morning sun cut harsh angles through the Nevada desert as Blackwood adjusted her flight suit, the fabric pulling tight across shoulders that had seen more combat hours than most of Corrigan's entire squadron combined. Her fingers moved with practiced precision across the pre-flight checklist, each motion economical, deliberate. The F-22 Raptor gleamed like a predator in the hangar's fluorescent lighting, its angular surfaces drinking in shadows and light with equal hunger. "Ghost, you're flying tail end Charlie today," Corrigan announced, his voice carrying the particular brand of condescension reserved for pilots he considered past their prime. "Try to keep up with the real aviators." The other pilots, call signs Viper, Hawk, and Thunder, exchanged glances. They'd heard the stories about Ghost's deployments, the classified missions over Syria and Yemen, but seeing her now in the sterile environment of Nellie's Air Force Base, those stories felt like myths. She was 42, ancient by fighter pilot standards, with silver threading through black hair pulled back in regulation style. Her movements lacked the aggressive swagger of younger pilots, replaced instead by something quieter, more deliberate. What they couldn't see was the way her eyes tracked every detail of the briefing room: exit points, communication equipment, the slight tremor in Thunder's hands that suggested pre-flight nerves. What they couldn't know was that the useless ink beneath her flight suit contained memorized coordinates for 17 high-value targets across 3 continents, intelligence gathered during black operations that officially never happened. The mission was supposed to be routine: air-to-air training exercise over the Mojave, 4 F-22s against simulated enemy aircraft. Standard dogfighting protocols, basic tactical formations. Nothing that should require the particular skill set that had earned Blackwood her call sign during 3 tours in places that didn't exist on official maps. As the pilots walked toward their aircraft, the morning air carried the scent of jet fuel and desert sage. Blackwood's boots echoed against concrete with the rhythm of someone who had walked this path 10,000 times before, in a dozen different countries, under stars and searchlights and the green glow of night vision. She climbed into her cockpit with the fluid grace of a woman returning home, her hands finding switches and controls with muscle memory deeper than thought. The radio crackled to life as engines spooled up across the flight line. "Ghost, this is Tower. You're cleared for departure in 3 minutes." "Copy, Tower." Her voice was steady, professional, betraying nothing of the storm building on the horizon, both meteorological and geopolitical. Weather reports showed clear skies, but Blackwood's trained eye caught the telltale wisps of high cirrus clouds that spoke of atmospheric disturbance. More troubling were the encrypted communications she'd intercepted during her pre-dawn intelligence briefing, fragments of chatter suggesting unusual activity in international airspace. The Raptor's engines sang their twin-throated song as she taxied toward the runway, following Corrigan's lead aircraft in a formation that felt more like a funeral procession than a training exercise. Behind her, Viper and Thunder maintained textbook spacing, their aircraft gleaming in the desert sun like steel sharks cruising through an ocean of concrete and heat shimmer. "Flight lead, this is Ghost," she transmitted, her voice cutting through the radio static with practiced precision. "Systems green, ready for departure." Corrigan's response carried the weight of barely concealed irritation. "About time, Grandma. Try not to break anything up there." The other pilots remained silent, but Blackwood caught the subtle shift in Thunder's formation, a slight adjustment that spoke of embarrassment at his flight leader's unprofessionalism. Good. The kid had potential beneath his nerves. She'd seen enough young pilots destroyed by toxic leadership to recognize the signs. As they lifted off into the Nevada sky, Blackwood felt the familiar embrace of altitude and speed. The Raptor climbed with predatory grace, its stealth coating drinking in radar waves like a black hole consuming light. Below them, the Mojave spread out in shades of ochre and rust, a landscape that had witnessed decades of military testing and the quiet heroism of pilots who pushed the boundaries of what was possible. The tattoo beneath her flight suit seemed to pulse with each heartbeat, its hidden coordinates a reminder of missions where the margin between success and catastrophe had been measured in milliseconds and inches. But for now, she was just another pilot on a routine training flight, carrying nothing more dangerous than simulated weapons and the accumulated weight of 1,000 forgotten battles. The radio crackled again. "Ghost, maintain heading 270, Angels 20. We'll see how those old reflexes hold up." "Copy that," she replied, banking the Raptor into the endless blue. What none of them knew was that her reflexes weren't the only thing being tested today. 300 miles to the east, a situation was developing that would transform their training exercise into something far more consequential, and her useless ink into the key to preventing an international incident that could reshape the balance of power across 3 continents. 20 minutes into the flight, the sky remained deceptively peaceful. Blackwood maintained her position at the rear of the formation, her Raptor cutting through thin air at Angels 22, the altimeter reading steady as the Nevada landscape rolled beneath them like a topographical map come to life. The other pilots had settled into the comfortable rhythm of routine training, radio chatter punctuated by callouts and formation adjustments, engines humming their familiar song of controlled power. "Flight, this is Viper," came the transmission from the number 2 aircraft. "I've got what looks like weather building to the northwest. Might want to adjust our training area." Blackwood's eyes moved to her radar display, but she was already tracking something else, a series of anomalous returns at the edge of her screen's range. Too regular to be weather, too fast to be commercial traffic. Her fingers moved across the instrument panel with the unconscious precision of muscle memory, adjusting sensitivity settings and filter parameters. "Ghost, what's your status back there?" Corrigan's voice carried its usual edge of impatience. "Still with us, or are you already thinking about retirement?" "Solid copy, flight lead." She kept her voice neutral, professional, even as her mind processed the tactical situation developing beyond their immediate airspace. All systems nominal. But they weren't. The encrypted communication system built into her helmet was receiving burst transmissions on frequencies that officially didn't exist. Fragments of intelligence chatter, position reports, and something else, coordinates that matched perfectly with the numerical sequences inked into her skin 3 years ago in a forward operating base that had been abandoned 6 months later. The tattoo had been more than personal decoration. During her final deployment, Blackwood had volunteered for a classified program that used human intelligence assets to carry critical information across borders where traditional communication methods were compromised. The coordinates and numerical sequences weren't random. They represented the locations of weapons caches, safe houses, and high-value targets across a region where American interests and Russian proxy forces maintained an uneasy balance. "Thunder, tighten up your formation," Corrigan commanded, his voice betraying the first hint of actual concentration. "We're approaching the training area." The designated airspace stretched ahead of them, a 3-dimensional box of sky where simulated combat would unfold according to carefully scripted scenarios. But Blackwood's attention was divided between the immediate tactical environment and the growing certainty that their routine training exercise was about to become something else entirely. Her radar screen painted a picture that made her blood run cold. 6 aircraft, flying in tactical formation, approaching their training area from the northeast. Too fast to be friendly, too coordinated to be coincidental. The encrypted chatter in her helmet confirmed what her instincts already knew. They were about to encounter aircraft that weren't supposed to exist in this airspace. Flight lead, this is Ghost. Her transmission carried a new urgency, the casual professionalism replaced by something harder, more focused. I'm painting unknown contacts, bearing 045, approximately 40 miles and closing. Recommend we. Negative, Ghost. Corrigan's interruption was sharp, dismissive. Probably just more training aircraft. Stick to the mission profile. But Blackwood was already running calculations in her head, her tactical mind processing angles and intercept courses with the clarity that had kept her alive through 3 combat deployments. The approaching aircraft were flying a formation that spoke of military precision, their approach vector designed to intercept rather than avoid. This wasn't coincidence. The tattoo's hidden intelligence suddenly took on new significance. If those coordinates were being activated, if the safe houses and weapons caches they represented were being compromised, then the aircraft approaching their training area might be part of a larger operation designed to extract or eliminate assets who knew too much. Assets like her. The sky ahead remained clear blue and infinite, but Blackwood could feel the weight of approaching storm clouds that had nothing to do with weather and everything to do with the classified ink beneath her flight suit. The morning's training exercise was about to become a test of skills that went far beyond anything covered in standard pilot training, and her reputation as a washed-up aviator with useless ink was about to be challenged by circumstances that would reveal exactly why she'd been chosen for this mission in the first place. The radio crackled with routine position reports, but beneath the ordinary military communications, Blackwood could hear the whisper of encrypted frequencies carrying messages that would change everything they thought they knew about their peaceful training flight over the Nevada desert. Contact bearing 042, now 35 miles and closing fast, she reported again, her voice cutting through the radio chatter with the authority of someone who had learned to trust her instincts in places where mistakes were measured in body bags. Flight lead, these aren't friendlies. The formation ahead of her seemed to tighten almost imperceptibly. 4 F-22 Raptors slicing through thin air with the unconscious precision of pilots who had flown together dozens of times. But Blackwood could read the subtle language of aircraft movement like a text written in aluminum and jet exhaust, Viper's slight deviation from perfect formation spacing, Thunder's micro-corrections that spoke of growing tension, even Corrigan's aggressive throttle adjustments that betrayed uncertainty beneath his dismissive confidence. Her helmet's heads-up display painted the tactical picture with ruthless clarity. 6 contacts, now 30 miles out, flying in a formation that screamed military precision. Their approach vector would intercept the training area in approximately 4 minutes, and their altitude profile suggested aircraft built for air-to-air engagement rather than ground attack or reconnaissance. Ghost, maintain radio discipline, Corrigan commanded, but there was something different in his voice now. A tightness that suggested he was finally looking at his own radar screen with the attention it deserved. The encrypted frequency in her helmet burst to life with a transmission that made her blood freeze. Package delivery confirmed. Assets are airborne. Initiate extraction protocol in 60 seconds. Package delivery. Assets airborne. The coordinates tattooed into her skin weren't just intelligence markers. They were targeting data for an extraction operation that had been years in the planning. Someone had identified her as a high-value intelligence asset whose knowledge of classified operations made her worth either rescuing or eliminating, depending on which side was running the operation. Flight lead, we need to abort this exercise and return to base immediately, she transmitted, abandoning all pretense of routine training communication. We are about to be intercepted by hostile aircraft with unknown intentions. Negative, Ghost. You're seeing ghosts where there aren't any. But even as Corrigan spoke, His F-22 began a subtle course correction that suggested his confidence was evaporating as quickly as the water vapor streaming from his wingtips in the thin air. 28 miles and closing. The approaching aircraft were maintaining radio silence, their formation tight enough to suggest either exceptional training or combat experience. Blackwood's tactical computer was running identification algorithms, but the returns were too clean, too perfect, exactly what she would expect from aircraft equipped with the latest stealth technology. Her fingers moved across the weapons control panel with practiced efficiency, bringing her simulated air-to-air missiles online. The irony wasn't lost on her. They were carrying training rounds designed to simulate combat rather than actually engage targets, while the aircraft approaching them were almost certainly armed with the real thing. "Thunder, Viper, switch to tactical frequency and maintain formation," she commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had led combat missions in airspace where the rules of engagement were written in blood rather than bureaucracy. "Ghost, you are not flight leader," Corrigan snapped. "Maintain." His transmission was cut off by the harsh electronic shriek of radar lock-on warning. All 4 F-22s were being painted by targeting radar from multiple sources, the electronic warfare system screaming alerts that transformed their peaceful training flight into a potential combat engagement. "All aircraft, we are being targeted," Blackwood announced, her voice steady despite the adrenaline surge that accompanied the familiar sound of imminent danger. "Recommend immediate evasive maneuvers and return to base." But even as she spoke, she knew it was too late. The approaching aircraft had achieved tactical surprise, positioning themselves between the training formation and home base. Whatever was about to happen in the Nevada sky, it would be decided by pilot skill, aircraft performance, and the deadly calculus of air-to-air combat, with her tattoo's hidden intelligence as the prize that someone was willing to kill for. The sky no longer seemed infinite and peaceful. It had become an arena where the accumulated weight of classified operations and hidden agendas was about to transform 4 pilots on a routine training mission into participants in an international incident that could reshape the balance of power across multiple continents. "Brake left, brake left." The transmission exploded across the radio frequency as 6 aircraft materialized from the radar shadows like predators emerging from digital camouflage. Blackwood's Raptor rolled into a crushing 6G turn, her body pressed into the ejection seat as physics and training took control of her movements. The peaceful morning sky transformed into a 3-dimensional chess game played at supersonic speeds, with death as the consequence of miscalculation. "What the hell?" Thunder's voice cut across the radio, young and sharp with the particular fear that comes when training suddenly becomes survival. His F-22 followed Blackwood's lead, breaking formation and diving toward the deck with the desperate energy of a pilot whose world had just shifted from simulation to lethal reality. Corrigan's aircraft pulled a different vector, climbing and turning right in a maneuver that spoke of either tactical brilliance or complete panic. "All stations, this is Falcon Lead. We have unidentified aircraft in restricted airspace. Repeat, we have hostile contact." But Blackwood was already 3 moves ahead in the deadly game unfolding around them. Her tactical display painted the picture with crystalline clarity. 6 aircraft in perfect combat formation, their approach vectors calculated to divide and overwhelm the American formation. These weren't random intruders or confused civilian aircraft. This was a precision military operation executed by pilots who understood both the capabilities of stealth fighters and the psychological pressure of aerial combat. "Ghost, what's your status?" Viper's voice carried the tight control of a veteran pilot managing fear and adrenaline in equal measure. "Defensive, breaking south," she replied, her Raptor carving through the thin air like a scalpel through flesh. "Unknown aircraft are maintaining tactical formation and appear to be." The missile warning tone cut through her transmission like a blade through silk. Someone had achieved target lock and was preparing to engage. In the span of heartbeats, their training exercise had escalated from simulated combat to the real possibility of aircraft being shot down over American airspace. Her encrypted communication system crackled with a transmission that chilled her to the bone. Asset confirmed. Initiate recovery protocol. Authorization Tango 77. Tango 77. The authorization code for a black operation so classified that its existence was denied by 3 different government agencies. Someone wanted her tattoo's intelligence badly enough to risk an international incident, and they were willing to shoot down American military aircraft to get it. Flight, this is Ghost. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had commanded combat missions in places that didn't appear on maps. We are the targets of a precision military operation. Recommend immediate dispersion and return to base using evasive protocols. You don't give orders here, Captain, Corrigan snapped. But his aircraft was already executing the kind of violent defensive maneuvers that spoke of instinct overriding ego. His F-22 rolled inverted and pulled toward the earth, jet exhaust painting contrails against the blue sky like signatures written in vapor and desperation. The approaching aircraft began their attack run with the coordinated precision of a military formation that had rehearsed this exact scenario. Blackwood's radar screen showed missile separation, real weapons launched from real aircraft at real targets. The training rounds in her own weapons bay suddenly seemed as useful as harsh language in a gunfight. Missile in the air. Thunder's voice cracked with the strain of someone whose morning had transformed from routine training to potential death in the span of minutes. I've got active radar homing, bearing 270. Blackwood's Raptor dove toward the deck, pulling G-forces that compressed her vision and made her anti-G suit inflate like a mechanical embrace. The missile streaked past her position, its proximity close enough that she could see the heat signature on her infrared sensors. Someone was shooting to kill, not capture. The irony struck her with bitter clarity. The tattoo that Corrigan had dismissed as useless ink was valuable enough to justify an armed attack on American military aircraft. The coordinates and intelligence embedded in the design weren't just historical artifacts from her deployment years. They were active operational intelligence that someone desperately needed to either recover or destroy. As her Raptor pulled out of its dive at barely 1,000 feet above the Nevada desert, Blackwood realized that everything about this morning had been carefully orchestrated. The training exercise, the timing, even the personnel selection, none of it was coincidence. Someone had manipulated the mission parameters to put her in exactly this position, isolated and vulnerable, with her accumulated intelligence as the prize. The question was whether the attacking aircraft belonged to allies attempting rescue or enemies seeking elimination. Either way, the answer would be written in missile contrails and the wreckage of stealth fighters scattered across the Mojave. All aircraft, return to base immediately, she commanded, her voice cutting through the radio chatter with the authority earned through 3 combat deployments. This is not a training exercise. 22,000 feet above the Nevada desert, Captain Zara, Ghost, Blackwood fought for her life while carrying the weight of classified intelligence that could reshape international relations. Her tattoo's useless ink had become the center of a storm that would test every skill she had learned in places where survival depended on split-second decisions and the unforgiving mathematics of aerial combat. The sky around them filled with the electronic shriek of targeting radar and missile warning tones as 4 American pilots discovered that some training exercises were designed to be fatal. Chaff, chaff, chaff. Viper's voice cut through the radio static as metallic strips bloomed from his aircraft like deadly confetti, creating false radar targets designed to confuse incoming missiles. His F-22 twisted through a series of defensive maneuvers that spoke of a pilot pushed beyond the comfortable boundaries of peacetime training into the harsh reality of combat survival. Blackwood's aircraft pulled through a crushing 8G turn, her vision graying at the edges as blood drained from her brain toward her feet. The anti-G suit squeezed her legs and abdomen like a mechanical python, fighting to keep her conscious as physics tried to render her helpless. Through the haze of extreme maneuvering, she maintained perfect awareness of the tactical situation developing around them. 6 hostile aircraft had achieved the tactical advantage of surprise and positioning. They controlled the airspace between the American formation and home base, forcing a fight in conditions of their choosing. Worse, they were equipped with live ordnance while her flight carried only training rounds, the equivalent of bringing harsh language to a gunfight. "Flight lead, we need immediate air support," she transmitted, her voice steady despite the G-forces compressing her chest. "Request emergency scramble from Nellies." "Already done," Corrigan replied, and for the first time that morning, his voice carried the professional competence that had earned him squadron command. Whatever personal animosity existed between them had been burned away by the reality of missiles and hostile intent. "Cavalry is en route, but we're on our own for the next 12 minutes. 12 minutes. In aerial combat, that was a lifetime, or exactly long enough to die several times over. Blackwood's tactical computer was running continuous calculations, processing the geometry of pursuit and evasion that would determine whether they survived long enough to see friendly reinforcements. Her encrypted communication system burst to life again. "Package is mobile. Initiate close-range intercept. Authorization remains Tango 77. The transmission confirmed her worst fears. This wasn't a case of mistaken identity or escalated training exercise. Someone had specifically targeted this mission to capture or eliminate her, using the tattoo's embedded intelligence as justification for an armed attack on American military aircraft. "Thunder, maintain defensive spacing and prepare for close engagement," she commanded, her aircraft rolling into an aggressive intercept course that would put her between the youngest pilot and the approaching hostiles. The kid was good, but he hadn't yet learned the particular skills required to survive when the rules of engagement disappeared, and survival became a matter of split-second decisions made at supersonic speeds. "Ghost, what the hell are you doing?" Corrigan's voice carried a new note of concern as he watched her Raptor accelerate toward the hostile formation instead of continuing evasive maneuvers. "Buying us time," she replied, her fingers dancing across the weapons control panel with movements too fast for conscious thought. The training rounds in her missiles might not be lethal, but they could still impact aircraft and systems. More importantly, aggressive action might disrupt the hostile formation's planned attack sequence. The lead hostile aircraft appeared on her heads-up display like a digital ghost materializing from electronic camouflage. Foreign design, angular and purposeful, flying with the confidence of a pilot who believed he controlled the engagement. His wingman held perfect formation spacing, their aircraft moving through the sky with a coordination that spoke of hundreds of hours of training together. Fox 2, Fox 2, she launched her first training missile, the simulated AIM-120 streaking toward the hostile formation at Mach 4. The weapon wouldn't kill, but its radar signature would force defensive maneuvers and buy precious seconds for her teammates to escape the engagement zone. The hostile formation reacted with professional competence, breaking into a defensive pattern that confirmed their military training and combat experience. But they had underestimated the psychological impact of facing a pilot who had learned aerial warfare in places where mistakes were measured in body counts rather than training scores. Splash 1. Thunder's voice carried surprised excitement as Blackwood's training round impacted the hostile wingman's aircraft. The foreign fighter rolled away in a cloud of simulated damage, its pilot pulling into a steep climb that took him temporarily out of the engagement. But 5 hostile aircraft remained, and they were closing fast with weapons that could transform F-22 Raptors into expanding clouds of aluminum and avionics. Blackwood's Raptor rolled inverted and pulled toward the earth, using the Nevada landscape as both shield and tactical reference, as she positioned for the next phase of an engagement that would be decided by pilot skill and the deadly mathematics of aerial combat. The morning sky had become an arena where years of classified intelligence and accumulated combat experience would determine whether 4 American pilots survived long enough to discover who wanted her tattoo's secrets badly enough to risk an international incident over the Nevada desert. "Break right, break right." The radar warning receiver screamed its electronic warning as another missile separated from the hostile formation. This one was tracking Thunder's aircraft with the relentless precision of modern guidance systems, its infrared seeker head painting the young pilot's exhaust signature with the electronic equivalent of a death sentence. Blackwood's Raptor snapped into a knife-edge turn that brought her across Thunder's defensive track. Her aircraft's stealth coding and electronic warfare systems created a false radar signature designed to confuse the incoming missile's guidance system. It was a desperate maneuver that relied more on electronic deception than tactical positioning, but desperation had become their primary tactical doctrine in the space of 5 minutes. "Guardian Angel, Guardian Angel." Thunder's voice carried the gratitude of a pilot whose life had just been saved by split-second timing and the kind of situational awareness that couldn't be taught in flight school. The missile detonated harmlessly between their aircraft, its proximity fuse triggered by Blackwood's electronic countermeasures rather than impact with a target. Shrapnel scattered across the sky like metallic rain, close enough that she could hear fragments pinging off her Raptor's armored surfaces. "Ghost, that was insane," Viper transmitted, his voice carrying a new respect that hadn't been present during the morning briefing. "Where did you learn that technique?" "Places that don't exist," she replied, her aircraft rolling back into offensive position as she scanned for the next threat. The truth was more complex. The maneuver had been developed during black operations over Syria, where Russian-made surface-to-air missiles had forced American pilots to improvise survival techniques that pushed the boundaries of both aircraft performance and human endurance. The hostile formation was adapting to their defensive success, spreading into a wider engagement pattern that would prevent similar mutual support tactics. Professional, disciplined, deadly. Exactly what she would expect from pilots who had been specifically trained to engage American stealth fighters. "Flight, this is Falcon Lead," Corrigan transmitted, his voice carrying the strain of someone managing multiple tactical problems simultaneously. "I'm reading friendly contacts inbound from the southeast. Estimated time to arrival, 8 minutes. 8 minutes. Still too long, but better than the 12-minute estimate from earlier. If they could survive long enough for reinforcements to arrive, the numerical advantage would shift in their favor. The question was whether their training, ammunition, and defensive maneuvering could hold off 5 hostile aircraft equipped with live ordnance for another 8 minutes of high-intensity aerial combat. Her encrypted communication system crackled again. "Package is proving elusive. Consider escalation to Terminal Solutions." Terminal Solutions. Military euphemism for killing her rather than capturing her alive. Someone had decided that the intelligence embedded in her tattoo was too dangerous to allow falling into enemy hands, even if that meant destroying the asset along with the information. "Thunder, Viper, listen carefully," she transmitted on a discrete frequency. "The hostile aircraft are not interested in all of us. They're specifically targeting me. I want you to break off and return to base while I lead them away from your position." "Negative, Ghost," Thunder replied immediately. "We don't abandon pilots, not today, not ever." The kid's courage was admirable but tactically naive. In the real world of black operations and classified intelligence, individual pilots were expendable assets measured against larger strategic objectives. Her accumulated knowledge of weapons caches, safe houses, and high-value targets across 3 continents made her either a valuable intelligence resource or a dangerous security liability, depending on who was running the current operation. But as her Raptor climbed back toward the engagement zone, she realized that Thunder's naive idealism might be their best tactical asset. The hostile formation expected her to behave like a professional intelligence operative, prioritizing mission success over personal survival. They weren't prepared for a coordinated defense by pilots who refused to abandon their wingman. "All aircraft, tactical frequency," she commanded. "We're going to use their expectations against them." The Nevada sky stretched endlessly above them, blue and merciless, as four American pilots prepared to discover whether loyalty and determination could overcome superior numbers and firepower. Below them, the Mojave Desert spread out like a vast proving ground where the accumulated weight of classified operations and international intrigue would be settled by the oldest form of military mathematics, pilot skill measured in split-second decisions, and the unforgiving physics of aerial combat. The tattoo beneath her flight suit seemed to burn with each heartbeat, its hidden coordinates, an embedded intelligence, the center of a storm that had transformed a peaceful training exercise into a battle for survival over the American Southwest. "Contact, bearing 350, Angels 18 and diving fast." Viper's voice cut through the tactical frequency as the hostile formation repositioned for another attack run. His F-22 rolled into a defensive spiral that painted contrails against the sky like white signatures written in desperation, and jet exhaust. Blackwood's radar screen painted the tactical picture with brutal clarity. The hostile aircraft had learned from their initial engagement, abandoning the coordinated formation attack in favor of multiple independent vectors designed to overwhelm defensive capabilities through sheer complexity. Classic Soviet tactical doctrine adapted for stealth aircraft and modern weapon systems. "They're splitting our attention," she transmitted, her tactical mind processing the geometry of pursuit and evasion that would determine the outcome of the engagement. "Thunder, maintain high cover. Viper, stay with Corrigan on the deck. I'm going to draw their primary formation into a vertical fight." "Ghost, that's suicide," Corrigan protested, his voice carrying the authority of squadron command but also a new note of respect that hadn't been present during the morning briefing. "You can't take on 3 aircraft in vertical combat." But she was already pulling her Raptor into a climbing turn that would position her above the hostile formation, trading speed for altitude in a maneuver that violated every tactical manual ever written about stealth fighter employment. The F-22's twin engines screamed their protest as she pushed them beyond normal operational parameters, climbing at a rate that compressed her into the ejection seat like a bug in a hydraulic press. 15,000 feet, 20,000, 25,000. The air grew thin enough that her aircraft's control surfaces began to lose effectiveness, each input requiring more aggressive movement to achieve the desired response. But altitude was energy, and energy was life in the three-dimensional chess game of aerial combat. "Package is attempting vertical escape," crackled through her encrypted communication system. "Maintain pursuit. Do not allow exfiltration." The transmission confirmed what she had suspected. Whoever was running this operation understood her tactical preferences and had prepared countermeasures accordingly. They knew she would attempt to use vertical maneuvering to gain advantage, which meant they had studied her combat history in uncomfortable detail. "Fox 3, Fox 3. The transmission exploded from one of the hostile aircraft as another missile streaked toward her position. This one was different, a long-range radar-guided weapon designed to engage targets at extended range where defensive maneuvering was limited by aircraft performance. Her Raptor rolled inverted and dove toward the Earth, using gravity to build the speed necessary for defensive maneuvering. The missile followed with relentless precision, its active radar seeker painting her aircraft with the electronic equivalent of a target designator. At this altitude, there was nowhere to hide from the weapon's sophisticated guidance system. Chaff and flare, chaff and flare. She triggered every defensive system available, filling the sky around her aircraft with metallic strips and infrared decoys designed to confuse missile guidance systems. The F-22 shuddered as defensive munitions deployed, creating a cloud of false targets that might buy precious seconds of survival. The missile detonated close enough to rattle her teeth, its proximity fuse triggered by the defensive countermeasures, but near enough that shrapnel peppered her aircraft's surfaces. Warning lights illuminated across her instrument panel, hydraulic pressure dropping, left engine running hot, radar warning receiver showing intermittent failures. Ghost, status report. Thunder's voice carried the concern of a pilot watching his wingman absorb battle damage in real time. Still flying, she replied, her hands moving across the instrument panel to assess and compensate for system failures. The Raptor was hurt but functional, its redundant systems maintaining flight capability despite the proximity detonation. But we're running out of time and options. 6 minutes until reinforcements arrived. Her aircraft was damaged, ammunition was depleted, and the hostile formation was maneuvering for what looked like a coordinated finishing attack. The morning that had begun with Corrigan's dismissive comments about useless ink was about to end with the kind of violence that made international headlines and classified after-action reports. But as she rolled her damaged Raptor back toward the engagement zone, Blackwood realized that her tattoo's intelligence might provide one final tactical advantage. The coordinates embedded in the design weren't just passive information. They included the locations of emergency landing strips and safe houses that could provide sanctuary if she could survive long enough to reach them. The question was whether a damaged stealth fighter could outrun 5 hostile aircraft long enough to disappear into the vast emptiness of the American Southwest, carrying secrets that someone was willing to kill for and others were willing to die to protect. "All aircraft prepare for final engagement," she transmitted, her voice steady despite the growing list of caution lights on her instrument panel. "Whatever happens next, remember that we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for every pilot who trusts us to bring them home." The sky above the Nevada desert had become an arena where loyalty and determination would be measured against superior numbers and the deadly mathematics of modern aerial warfare. "Bandits inbound, multiple vectors." Corrigan's voice cracked across the radio frequency as the hostile formation executed a coordinated attack that demonstrated professional military training and ruthless tactical competence. His F-22 pulled through a defensive break that painted vapor trails against the morning sky like white scars across blue canvas. Blackwood's damaged Raptor shuddered as she rolled into another evasive maneuver, the left engine running rough from shrapnel damage, but still producing enough thrust to keep her airborne. Her heads-up display painted the tactical picture with crystalline clarity. 5 hostile aircraft converging from multiple directions in a pincer movement, designed to eliminate escape routes and overwhelm defensive capabilities. "Ghost, your 6 o'clock is getting warm." Viper's warning came with the urgency of a pilot watching death approach from behind. His own aircraft was engaged in a knife fight with 2 hostiles, vertical spirals and crushing G-forces as both sides maneuvered for the split-second advantage that would determine survival. The radar warning receiver screamed another missile launch, this one from her blind spot where a hostile aircraft had achieved the perfect firing position. She could see the weapon's exhaust signature in her mirror, a contrail of death approaching at Mach 3 with the relentless precision of modern guidance technology. "Not today," she whispered, pulling her Raptor into a maneuver that existed at the intersection of desperation and tactical brilliance. The aircraft rolled inverted and dove toward the deck, using the Earth's radar shadow to break missile lock while simultaneously positioning for a counterattack that would require perfect timing and a damaged aircraft performing beyond its design specifications. The missile detonated behind her,